Alrighty, so before I go to Stanford to watch the annual Cali Classico that is happening at Stanford Stadium between the San Jose Earthquakes versus the LA Galaxy, let's talk about the San Jose Earthquakes in the moving forward series. And although this Cali Classico means a lot in terms of all those teams that is battling for the Western Conference, as I mentioned in the preview yesterday, pretty much every team that's battling for those Western Conference playoff race and all those teams that is in the playoff bubble is going to be rooting for the Quakes very hard in this one. For the Quakes, there really isn't much to play in this game, other than the fact that, it is for pride, and also the fact that the Quakes continue their dominance over the Galaxy at Stanford Stadium. But this season for the Quakes, yeah, it's been kind of a very predictable season where, as much as I said in the beginning of the year that I had a feeling this is going to be a throwaway year for this team, and that this team looked like they're going to potentially finish dead last in the Western Conference, and I was hoping maybe they can prove me wrong for once. One thing about the Quakes is that they always prove me right when I'm being pessimistic, because this season they currently have a 7-10-14 record with 31 points. They scored 46 goals, which is actually pretty good. I mean, that's actually one of the highest mark for all the teams that's below the red line. But here's the problem. They gave up 64 goals this season, and if it wasn't for DC, who also gave up 60 plus goal and actually gave up one more than the Quakes had, they actually would have had the worst defensive record. In fact, it's been a long time this season that, it's been pretty much almost the entire season that the Quakes have owned the record for the worst defensive record, and DC of course have eventually overtook them for the worst defensive record, because DC also have been losing a lot of games and losing games big, and they have a goal differential of -18, and not surprisingly, they're currently dead last in the Western Conference, though that could, of course, change if they do get a win against the Galaxy. They once again will find themselves in 13th place. Now, top goal scored so far this season for the Quakes, unsurprisingly, it's Jeremy Aboasi, who really is one of the only positive for this season in terms of player performance, with 16 goals, followed by Christian Espinoza with 6 goals, Benji Kikanovic with 5 goals, Jamero Montero with 4 goals, and Jackson Yule with 4 goals. Top assist leader, unsurprisingly, Christian Espinoza, one of the best winger in terms of dropping dimes in the box, with 13 assists this season, followed by Jamero Montero with 7 assists, Young Gregush with 6 assists, K. Cal with 5 assists, and Benji Kikanovic with 3 assists. Now, the highlights for the Quakes season. Now, normally, whenever it comes to firing a head coach, I wouldn't actually put them as a highlights, because, you never want to see a coach being fired for whatever reason. But in this case, the writing was on the wall with the way that, it was already a big kind of head scratcher with them bring back Matias Almeyda when he clearly said that he doesn't want to be there. Like, he repeatedly have said this season, and it's just getting to a point where I was kind of stunned. The front office have not fired him. I mean, all the things that Almeyda have said and the nasty thing he have said about the front office and about the team, I mean, at any other club, that is definitely a fireable offense. But they eventually did get rid of him, and that, again, he seems like he was the biggest problem, because you can clearly see this team was definitely not playing for him. Like, all the players were clearly not playing for Almeyda, and it shouldn't be a big surprise that once Almeyda is gone, this team immediately started to play well and live up to its potential. The attack, for the most part, was pretty good in this one. I mean, yes, it's not great, because, when you look at some of the teams that have the best attacking the attacking teams in the league, they range around 50 or 60 goals. But for teams that is currently dead last in the Western Conference, that's pretty good in terms of scoring 46 goals, which, again, this kind of reminds me a little bit of the 2018 season, where, remember in 2018 when this team went on to finish the worst record in the league and the worst record in team history by a country mile? They were a team that didn't have problem in terms of goal scoring. They actually did have legitimately some goal scoring. In fact, I think that team had 3 goals goal scorer team, and for a team that only finished with 4 wins, and they have 3 players that have 10 goals scored, which basically tells you the fact that, yeah, it's pretty clear that the attack was not the main culprit of why they've been struggling so much this season. And we'll definitely get to what's the main culprit. Well, I already talked about how the defense, of course, has been the main culprit for majority of the year. And then, of course, they also beat some good teams. Again, it's surprising, but they actually have beat some of the better team in the league, like LAFC, Seattle, and the Portland Timbers. And I know Seattle back that, or now it's not really considered to be a good team because they're just barely trying to stay alive in terms of the playoff race. But back then, this is a team that was about to play in CCL, and this team was definitely still looking like the Seattle Sounders that we know of, a team that can dominate teams, and that they've been able to win that game. And then again, the game against LAFC. Yes, I know LAFC started a relatively weak team, but that was definitely one of the biggest shockers. Like, I thought the Quakes had absolutely zero chance against an LAFC team that was running people over, and the fact that they were able to pull off a victory like that, yeah, that was definitely considered to be good. And it's also important that they're even in some of these games is where they lost, they actually when they do face against good teams, sometimes they actually have done well against them. So again, at least they've been able to beat some good team throughout the stretch. But obviously, now we're going to talk about the obvious lowlights of this team and why they're sitting dead last in the Western Conference. And that, of course, is defense, and more defense. I mean, it's pretty much clear that this team, when you see them play every single game, they can't defend. Like, they just simply cannot defend. That back four is by far the worst back four in the league this season, and that, it's getting to a point where if the Quakes actually kept a clean sheet, which, believe it or not, they have actually kept 2 clean sheets this season. I mean, as bad as this defense is, it's kind of surprising that they're able to keep clean sheet, but it's getting to a point where if they kept a clean sheet, that is considered to be a shocker. Or actually, no, they didn't just keep 2 clean sheets. I think they kept 3 clean sheets this. I forgot about the 0-0 draw that they had against Nashville SC. Even though that wasn't a win, it's still a clean sheet because they had a scoreless draw. But yeah, keeping the goal out of their net has been a big problem. And maybe we'll also add to the fact that the goalkeeping was also a bit of a problem. And again, as I mentioned before, I'm starting to lose faith a little bit of JT Marcinkowski, where I just think like he's a little bit too inconsistent. And I know he's still a relatively young goalkeeper, and that of course does happen. But he's been in the league for a couple of years. We need to of course see some development. And I thought that in the previous year, I thought he actually looked decent, and that this year is definitely a down year. And when you're a young player and you want to continue to develop to your potential, you simply cannot have some of these years where you can have a little bit of a drop. Or in this case, for Marcinkowski, I think this season he definitely suffered a big drop compared to his previous couple of years, to a point where I was even questioning, is he even the future of this team in terms of the goalkeeping position. Now getting rid of Almeyda in the beginning of the season, again, it was just no brainer, the fact that Almeyda clearly shouldn't have been there in the beginning of the season. I've talked about it throughout this off season. If there is one thing that the Quakes can potentially self-destructing themselves, is having Almeyda in that front office, because again, he clearly doesn't want to be there. And again, I will say that as much as I may be being harsh with Almeyda, I will say that some of the things I would say that kind of get him super mad is because of the transfers, and some of the things that he said that the front office, of course, are not giving him enough resources to get his player, which partially that is true, because when you look at some of the signings that they made and the amount that the Quakes have spent, again, it's definitely on the lower scale in the league. But that being said, I also talk about how Almeyda also kind of contradicting himself when he realized he also signed up a lot of players doing his run, and especially a lot of his own player that used to play for him in this team, and that again, most of them has not worked out whatsoever. So there's of course the double-edged sword in terms of that, and that it's just getting to a point where again, Almeyda was clearly holding this team down. Nobody was actually playing for him, and the Quakes finally realized that was the case. But by then, it just kind of felt like it was too late for them. Though it definitely looked like it wasn't, because when Alex Cavallo stepped in, he actually stabilized the ship and started to go on a bit of a good run where this team were getting close to the playoffs. And then, yeah, he basically immediately sank the ship again with an 0-4-2 stretch in May and June. And again, part of that is due to the fact that Cavallo, as much as I think he's definitely a slight upgrade in Matias Almeyda, at least he's not doing these experimental kind of formation that Almeyda tried to do. I mean, during the last couple of games in Almeyda Rim, it feels like he's just trying to purposely sabotage this team by putting these weird formation that clearly does not work. And at least Cavallo realized that, yeah, let's not try that. Let's actually act like a normal team for once. One of the things that has been very frustrating under Carvalho's reign has been his substitution patterns and just the tactics that he used. I mean, again, I'm not going to go too hard on him because, again, he's just an interim head coach. And when you have an interim head coach, you obviously get that coaching bump, which I think that's why the Quakes went on a relatively good run after they fired Almeyda. But, of course, once that new coach bump and that new coach kind of boost run out, then that's what happened. What we saw with them going for an 0-4-2 stretch to really sink their chances of making the playoffs. And, again, lately, they just have been very inconsistent. Like, they've been able to get some wins there and there, but for the most part, it's been losses in crucial games that really sink any hope of them getting back into the Western Conference playoff race. Now, the biggest win this season, they had a couple of ones. Like I mentioned, they did win against LAFC Seattle and Portland. And I could have easily picked one of those games, but I'm actually going to go with the 3-2 win that they had against the Galaxy on the road again. I think that was probably the best performance that the Quakes have put, especially in the first half, where in the first half, it looked like they were the team that I was hoping to expect to be a decent team, well-drilled on the defensive end and also on the attack and go up 3-0, and they just barely hanged on in the end. But the biggest loss this season, again, there's a lot to choose for, but I'm going to go with the 6-0 loss against FC Cincinnati. Again, just like my previous couple of episodes talking about these teams that near the bottom of the standings, their biggest losses usually are just catastrophic losses and big blowout, and that 6-0 loss against FC Cincinnati was definitely the case. Though I will say that in that loss, as much as I know the scoreline is bad and that is going to go down as one of the worst losses in Quakes history, they didn't actually play that badly. If you look at what happened in the first half. In fact, if you just ignore what happened in the second half, they actually played well in the first half, and I feel like that game was kind of a little bit of a throwback of Chris Leach tenure in 2017. Where remember when Chris Leach took over this team in 2017 after Dominic Kintner, of course, got the sack. He was doing well, at least for this team playing at home, but when it comes on the road, yeah, that's when it goes bad. And when it goes bad, it goes really bad for this team. And that kind of felt like it was the case against Cincinnati, where as soon as Cincinnati got like three or 2 goals and then 3 goals, it just kind of snowballed, and it just gets to a point where they end up dropping 6 on the Quakes in that one. Now, in terms of the average attendance, 13,300 fans showed up, which is the worst in the Western Conference out of any team, and second to dead last. Only Inter Miami has a worse attendance than the Quakes. And again, it's not a big surprise because, Quakes fans are pretty fed up with this team. And I don't blame for some of them not showing up, because I don't think anyone want to see this kind of product. Even I know at times the Quakes do play some entertaining soccer. It's not really about the entertaining aspect anymore. It's really about just winning games and able to get reserved. And the fact that they haven't been able to do so for the past couple of years, it's now getting to a point where fans are just fed up and they're not going to show up. And not to mention, you also have the ownership that this team, of course, had. It's also so understandable why fans are not showing up, because they're not going to spend their hard-earned money to go to games so that they can continue to support this ownership that is one of the biggest reason, if not the biggest reason, that is holding this team down. Now, in terms of revelation, Jeremy Obose. I mean, it's pretty clear it has to be Jeremy Obose. I mean, I could have easily said it was Espinoza, because I think this year he definitely had a bounce back year compared to last season with 13 assists, but you got to go with Jeremy Obose. I mean, this is exactly the guy that I was hoping when they got him from the Portland Timbers. And again, that trade that the Timbers made to get rid of Obose to the San Jose Earthquakes, and even though the Quakes did pay a bit of an amount to get him, I mean, $1 million general allocation money is definitely not nothing to say it's a little, but consider we've seen before where there's been $1 million general allocation money move, and that the team, of course, paid that $1 million general allocation money and able to develop a player that even is better than his previous club. I think that's the case for Jeremy Obose. I mean, he is starting to look like the guy that I remember a couple of years ago. I remember back in 2018 and 2017, he was definitely considered to be one of the upcoming number 9 in this league. And even there's a lot of rumors, the fact that he could be the next number 9 for this U.S. men's national team. Now, obviously, it hasn't worked out in a way because he has been suffering a lot of injuries, especially with concussion. And also, not to mention, the Portland Timbers have kind of pissed him off at a rate where, I think the reason why he eventually left the Timbers is because he was upset the fact that he's playing on the wing when he's clearly not a winger. And that the Quakes, of course, given a chance in the number 9 role. And that even though last year, in his first year, he didn't make a lot of big impact. Again, the concussion injury might be the reason why that is the case. But now when you see a fully healthy Jeremy Avosi, you can see why when they, of course, got him last year, why this is definitely one of the biggest steal that the Quakes, of course, has had. And for a team that, coming into near the end of the Wando era, I was very concerned about the fact that, Wando is no longer there. So who is actually going to be the number 9 that is going to be stepped up on this team and kind of pass the torch, or take the torch from Wando in terms of being the star number 9 for this team? Well, feels like we have the answer. It's Jeremy Avosi, and he's definitely the guy to do so, because there's been times where he really reminds me, well, not really in terms of Wando, because he's not the same player as Wando, but he's a player that is a deadly goal scorer. And again, this is something that the Quakes are very, very fortunate to have, to go from the all-time goal scorer to a guy that have been a proven goal scorer in MLS, which is something that, again, judging by some of the past Quakes signings, this is something I didn't think they were going to do, and that this is one of the rare times that the Quakes actually got it right in terms of signings. And again, a lot has to give Chris Leitch the credit in terms of pulling this move off. But the biggest disappointment for the Quakes, I'm going to go with 2 players. I'm going to go with K. Cow and Jackson Yeo. I mean, it's not a big surprise that they are considered disappointment, because, K. Cow, a very underwhelming year this season, really kind of started to drop off in terms of that hype level that we had from the previous year. And then Jackson Yeo become the latest victim of a Quakes player when he get a chance to be on the national team, or even on the youth national team, because he was the captain of that Olympic team back in last season. That you basically will becoming a player that just does not recover the same form. I mean, I swear this happens to every single Quakes player, where whenever they get into to a good level and that they eventually break into the national team, and then when they come back from national team duty, they just never rediscover that same kind of form. Which is why I'm kind of glad that, hopefully in the future we're not going to see any more players on this team that potentially can represent the U.S. men's national team, and especially in the case of Jeremy Avosi, as much as, there's been whispers he could still do so. Yeah, keep him out of the national team. I don't want him to suffer the same curse as all these Quakes players that have done well, and then they immediately regress after they join the national team. And again, that's the case for Jackson Yeo. He has really regressed at a level where, I mean, this is a guy that I thought he was going to be the real deal, and he can still be if he can have a bounce back year next season. But there's been multiple times where I'm pretty sure a lot of Quakes fans have been very frustrated with the way that he's been performing, especially in the midfield this season. Now, moving forward for the Quakes, seems like they're going with the Union way. Play the kids and hope the veteran can step up. And what that basically means is that it feels like they're following the same philosophy that the Philadelphia Union is done. And one of the reasons why the Union has been considered to be such a great team this season is that they have some really good academy product, and also they pretty much have hit a grand slam on all the veteran signings that they have done. Now, I'm not sure if that's going to work out the same for the Quakes, because like I said, most of the signings that they have in terms of veteran present have not been good whatsoever. But at least, play the kids is definitely one thing that I think this team is going to do, and especially getting Luchi Gonzalez, a guy that has the history of playing the kids and love to use his academy, and coming into this Quakes academy, that even though it's definitely not going to be at the same level as when he was with FC Dallas and with that academy, it is still considered to be one of the more well-known academy. I mean, I think the Quakes academy, if you want to talk about one of the most underrated academy in MLS, the Quakes academy has to be right up there, because this is an academy that I don't think it's getting enough recognition, and there is definitely a lot of good talent in this academy that I can't wait when they do graduate from it and get into the starting 11, how they're going to look like. They need another quality number 6. So as much as I know the third point I'm going to talk about is defensive help, they need another quality number 6. They need to strengthen that midfield. That's also one of the reasons why they have given up a lot of goals. I mean, as much as I know the back line doesn't help, you know, we've seen before where teams, even if teams that have bad backline, if you have a solid number 6 and you have a guy in that defensive midfield role that can put out the fire before it gets into the last breach of defense, then it can of course work out too. So that's something that I think the Quakes desperately needed, because you know, if the defense continue to be bad, at least they can acknowledge the fact that, you know, they need another quality number 6 to basically put out those fire before it gets to that part. And again, when you look at the number 6 role right now for this team, I mean, guys like Jackson Yo, Jutson, and Eric Remedi, they just haven't been anywhere close to the level that I thought that they were going to be. I mean, I remember last season I talked about this was supposed to be one of the strongest midfield in the league, and it just have not worked out whatsoever. And then of course I talk about the defensive help. They need to continue to reinforce that. And then the last thing, as I've always said, in terms of the moving forward series with the San Jose Earthquakes, pray the ownership is willing to spend some money and actually look for some good talent and willing to spend the money, because again, that's one of the problem for this team. That is what really is holding back this team right now, and that we'll see whether or not if that is going to be the case. Probably not, because again, you know, as much as I've said this many times, to this day, this team is still one of the cheapest team and have spent the lowest amount out of any team right now in MLS. But let's just hope it's going to be changed, and that let's just hope next season, with another new era for the Quakes, it feels like I've said this at least 5 times in the past 6 years, that things are going to be changing. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video? And as always, let me know in the comments below, what do you think was the highlights, the lowlights, the biggest win, biggest loss, the revelation and disappointment in terms of players, and moving forward, how are the Quakes are going to look heading into next season. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.